Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insight Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your organization. We're recording today on September 20th, 2023, HR Huddle episode 62, bringing you all the news we hope that you can use this week. And I'm your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group, a research and advisory firm. And joining me is my co-host today, Cliff Stevenson, Director of Research and Principal Analyst for Sapient Insights Group. Cliff, welcome to the show. We have been back and forth on the road this week. It's been kind of crazy, but there's a lot of tea to spill, I think, don't you?
I think so. And by the time you're hearing this, our friends listening, it's going to be a week before HR Tech. But yeah, this has been a very busy couple weeks, mostly for you, Stacey, I'll admit. But I did have a trip myself, and we'll talk about everything that we saw on those trips. But we have some news from the industry as well.
We do. And I just have to laugh because it's been busy. I've been on the road a lot, but Cliff's been back in the home office. Your home office is in Florida, though, so you got rain and sun to go along with all that home office. But back in the home office, making sure the annual HR System Survey report is getting written and analyzed and done. So don't let him kid you. There's been some 14-hour days that he's been put into from data crunching. So it's been a process. He's getting to learn the fun of it.
That's right. But I will say, it's going to sound like a commercial, but I'm really excited. This has been so interesting to see all the data coming through, see the connections, get a sense for how it all ties together. But even if you're only interested in just payroll or just HRMS or just the new technologies that are out, there's a lot there. There's a lot we asked, and I thank you all for putting in the time to answer those questions, especially towards the end of the survey. It's just amazing. And hearing all the comments and putting all that into this paper, it's really cool. It truly is a voice of the customer, as we say in the paper. So yeah, it's 14-hour days, yes, but enjoyable.
You're close to almost 200 pages now, right? So we're almost double where we were at in 2019. And this year, it'll be almost like 30 pages more than what we had even last year. So it's just more content than we've ever had in this year's report, I think, right?
That's right. A lot of expansion into new areas, like looking at rewards and recognition. We've really expanded our look at emerging tech. You've heard us on this podcast. We talk about AI, all of things we hear, that we see, that we hear from you. We want to put that in there. So that's part of it now too. So it's not just a sort of bulked up for no reason. It's, if anything, we're more focused on what matters based on the feedback that we've got. But there's a lot out there. There's new things being added to our world of work every day. And we're happy to kind of have that, be able to reflect that back along with our own insights.
Yeah, I'm always excited. So for anybody maybe who's new to our podcast, if you haven't heard before, Cliff and I jumped right in talking about the report, but this is going to be the 2024, see if I get the years right, annual HR System Survey report. And it's 26th year that Cliff is talking about and that I'm talking about. And we put this out every year. So it's this major event in everybody's lives who works on it, but also in those who we distribute it for and deliver it. And at the big HR Tech conference, because we launch our key findings at that event in Las Vegas each year. So it's a pretty big deal for all of us. So we hope you get as excited about it as we do. Also, just before we dive into all the news for this week, because this is going to be out before the week before HR Tech in Las Vegas, if you're here in the United States and you're attending the HR Executive Magazine's event, it is, we think right now, going to be one of the largest events of the season in this case. I mean, we just got numbers, again, the early preliminary sign-up numbers for our workshop that we're doing prior to the HR Tech conference on that Monday, October 9th. And we're hearing something in the range of 400 to 500 people registered for just that workshop. My bet is we're probably going to see somewhere in the range of maybe 700 to 8,000 participants this year. I don't know. We'll see. It is nice to see these events coming back to the market. There might even be more people. So if you're going to the HR Technology Conference and you want to maybe catch up with Steve, myself, with
Cliff, yeah, or Steve. Right. He's great too. Steve Goldberg. Wonderful man.
No, my brain was actually thinking of Steve Bose, because Steve Bose is the coordinator for this year's annual HR Technology Conference and always the guest host who announces everyone. So Steve, this is a shout out to you. I was thinking about you when I meant to say it, Cliff. Because I just saw him this week in Las Vegas for the other event that I was at. But anyways, if you were looking to see Cliff and I, and you want to catch up with us, a couple of different places you can reach us. And we'd love to be able to get a chance to talk to anybody out there who listens to us, who has questions for us, who just wants to say hi. It makes us feel really excited to get a chance to talk to people who are listening to us on our podcast and who follow the research that we do. So first off, make sure you attend the workshop. If you registered for it, I know sometimes it's hard to sort of get everything kind of done and ready, but if you're coming in on Monday morning and you'd like to get a chance to network early with a smaller group of people, especially going to be doing some industry breakouts. So you'll get some more industry specific networking at the workshop that is going to be on building an adaptable HR systems strategy. And it's from 1 to 4 on Monday, the October 9th. And it'll be delivered by myself and Cliff Steven. You'll also see some of our other team members there, Terry Zipper and Susan Richardson from Sapient Insights Group, as well as our sponsor UKG will be at that event as well. And then also, if you want to maybe come see us on the expo hall floor, we'll be recording a special Spilling the Tea on HR Tech live from the HR Technology Conference Expo Hall booth and it's going to be at the UKG booth at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, October 10th. With our guest co-host there will be Dr. Jarek Conrad, who's Vice President of Human Insights and the Executive Director of the Workforce Institute at UKG. So we're going to talk a little bit about future predictions, both our data as well as the data from Workforce Institute and some of the items that have come out of Dr. Jarek Conrad's recent book that he published. And then just as a little note, for the first 5 people that mentioned they heard about that event here on this podcast, you will receive a signed Introduction to HR Technology book. So I'll be bringing them along with me for that podcast. So be sure to show up. First 5 people to mention that they listen to us on the podcast will get that free book. I feel a little bit like one of those call out artists.
Well, I'll tell you what, Stacey, I'll admit that you were the opposite because you didn't mention who wrote that book. You just mentioned
that's a good point.
Written by Stacey. She's not just signing a random book. It is her own book. A must read if you're in the industry. I quote it all the time, and not just because I have to. I did it even when I worked somewhere else. So
thank you, Cliff. Yeah,
it will be there. She'll be signing it. So quite the opposite of being a salesy.
Of over promotion. Yeah, no. I actually just like to give out my book, and it's actually really a fun thing. So
yeah, I have a signed copy. Well worth it. Yeah, that's perfect.
And then the last thing is that anybody wants to reach out to us and see us, be sure to stay through Friday afternoon or Friday morning. Will be the keynote, the wrap-up keynote on October 13th, where we'll be spilling all the tea in this year's annual HR Systems Survey findings on October 13th at the launch of the annual HR Systems Survey findings, 8 in the morning, I believe 8:30 in the morning is when we do that session. And we will be staying after to listen to some of our friends who will also be delivering their sessions, Brian Summers right after me, and then Jason Aberbrook, I think, as well. So I think it's going to be a busy week. There's no doubt about it. Right?
Yeah. Well, when we do that live broadcast, we'll have the exact numbers, but preliminary reports are that this is going to be one of the largest HR techs ever. So.
Well, I mean, besides just the fact that we're heading into HR tech season, which I think is big for a lot of the vendors here in the States, there are, I counted up and I was going to be at 8 different events between both client events and vendor conferences between the first couple weeks in September and the last couple weeks in November. So there's no shortage of other things going on at this time. Cliff, what are some of the big topics we're going to cover today?
Yeah, let's get into that and we'll talk a little bit about our travel plans. And also at the end of today's episode, we'll talk a little about where you've been and where I've been and what we've learned from that, the insider info. But the tea we've got comes from all over. We've got ServiceNow releasing some new additions to their platform. We've got some news coming out of the California Supreme Court that could have a big effect on how we use AI. There, ring the bell. I said AI. Took us a while to say that in this podcast, but there it is. Got to mention it. There is a new report out from Cornerstone, their 2023 Talent Health Index that was under embargo, actually, but we had an early look at that. But it is out now, and we can talk about some of the findings we've seen from that are interesting. The CEO of Lattice had an announcement that they have expanded their platform. And then we'll talk about some of what you've seen from ADP and Oracle, including some major news of an acquisition by ADP. But why don't we get started with that ServiceNow bit of news? This came through the wire, and this is some more automation solutions to their Now platform. And a lot of it, in fact, all of it, I would say, has to do with security and compliance. So don't let your eyes glaze over. We've talked about the importance of this, or ears glaze over, I guess, if that's even a saying. But they have their zero trust access feature. So that has to do with the authorization going back and forth. That is, if you saw the big Microsoft leak, or really if you've seen the news at all, you're seeing leaks. That generally happens to do with the problems with encryption or with authorization is one weak link breaks the chain. So this is adding to that whole zero trust, meaning even if there's been some sort of issue beforehand, they will require authorization no matter what. There's some third-party risk management that they've expanded in there that helps with the visualization, with being able to tie in third-party applications, that sort of thing. And then also they've introduced a software bill of materials, which will help bring in component inventory, give sort of the idea of an overview of everything that's been latched on or added on to any of your HR tech, or really anywhere in your infrastructure to manage risk within across that, even if you're adding in open source software, any plugins, and get a comprehensive view of that. So that's that sort of inventory. That's what they're calling your software bill of materials, which may not catch on, but I like it quite a bit because it obviously brings the idea of the bill of rights. And here you have a sort of bill of materials.
Well, it's an interesting, because this is more of a tech update, and they're calling it the Vancouver release, right? Then a sort of a functionality kind of update that has to do with much of the HR side. But since ServiceNow has a big HR component to their platform these days, and a lot of it has to do with some sensitive material around personal employee information, this kind of authentication is becoming bigger and more important to them, right? And I do think that we're going to see more HR technology professionals and even heads of HR who are going to be held accountable to understanding the security elements in place for all of this technology, right? As they ask for more systems to be integrated, as they ask for more people to be accessing different areas, they have to understand. And there's also, I think that the other side of it is a lot of people complain about the multiple levels of authorization being required by technology these days. But the reality is it's absolutely necessary with all the phishing risks and all the fact that, hey, someone slips up and lets their passcode go because they got scammed in a call or in a conversation or in an email, right? This is the kind of stuff that's trying to alleviate. And it is human beings who are at the heart of a lot of those challenges. And so I think some of their naming on this, like ServiceNow Zero Trust Access, is on target, feels a little harsh sometimes, but I think it's a reality that we all live with, right? Yeah.
That's right. And you've clearly done your homework, because that brings us right into the legal ruling that happened on September 11th, I believe. It could have been the 12th. Nope, September 11th. And it was the California ruling that happened recently. That was Reigns versus US HealthWorks Medical Group. You'll hear it a lot if you are even slightly involved in the use of AI in the workplace. You're going to just hear it referred to as Reigns, but that's the full use. And that was California Supreme Court. And due to the nature of US law, if you're listening for somewhere else, a lot of times New York and California laws tend to be precedents for federal law, or have a lot of meaning, because that is a lot of our workers are in those places, or at least touch those sort of places. And basically, what is that law? That is, or at least that ruling, saying that third-party groups can be held liable for discriminatory acts, any problems at all, anything that would violate California law in the hiring process, even including, right, their software that is being used. So it's not just if you use a group to do your hiring, but also if you're using software that is putting pre-employment questions out there, if it's somehow separated from you. Now, that doesn't mean you're not held liable. It just means that kind of comes across. And again, don't just take our word for it. We're not lawyers. None of us have been trained in that. Always ask your legal department before making any decisions. But I think it raises some interesting questions. This was also put forth in a salary.com newsletter. That's what I'll be linking to, because it does raise some questions you may want to talk to your tech provider about. Is there a possibility for discrimination? What can you do to mitigate that? If that is the case, what suggestions are in there? How are the predictions, insights made? If you've listened to us before, Stacey and I always talk about transparency, about understanding how the algorithm works. You don't need to see the code. You just need to know it's sort of if this, then that decision-making process, so that you can better understand where biases could be introduced or where they could come out. So again, meaningful human oversight is always the phrase that you should be thinking of, especially in light of this ruling, the Reins ruling. So just important to keep in mind. And it goes right back to, as we were saying before, the importance of tech within your organization, how it's structured, where there could be liability and compliance issues.
Yeah, this is such a big conversation, right?
Mm.
And because it has a ruling in California doesn't mean it won't be challenged and maybe pushed forward even all the way up to higher courts, right, over time. But I do think that I think there's a technology in particular has been allowed. And I think that has been, the word is allowed because we don't see it in other industries in some of the same ways, to throw up their hands and say, we just provide the technology. We're not making the final decision. But if that solution does have a AI component that is making a recommendation, in some sense, it is part of that decision, I think is what this judgment is stating. I do think that the human oversight is something we get asked about a lot. Like, what does that mean? I think some of it is that you always have to know what is the triggers that's moving those AI decisions, as you had mentioned. But I think it also means you should be running parallel efforts sometimes while you're calibrating and testing all this work, which means extra work during implementations. You don't just turn things on and let them run. You do adverse impact analysis, those kind of things. They're really important, and everybody should be understanding sort of how that's done. And the vendors should be part of that conversation. If you guys are looking for some more details on this, as Cliff and I said, we're not lawyers by any means. We think these are important topics to be talking about. I think actually this article that you're mentioning, Cliff, was written by Heather Busing, who is a good friend of ours and is sort of up to date and is a lawyer herself on all of these topics, as well as Kate Bischoff is another friend of ours. Both of them, I think, would be great resources if you're trying to figure out your way through some of these new legal filings. So
yeah, they're always not able to find them just by typing in those names. I'll put links in the show notes to both of their LinkedIn profiles so you can find them easily. That's a good point, Stacey, that sort of oversight, and also not just looking for bias, but looking for ways to improve. A lot of the talk about AI, so often as it should be, is in its availability to help you be more productive. Yeah. And we talk about, so then we say, okay, and that allows you to make more things that humans do well. Well, what is that? That is actually a topic that came up during my meeting with, or the analyst event that happened for OC Tanner. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or if you want to sort of save that for the end.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think OC Tanner is, I think primarily they would be put in the area of rewards and recognition, right? And I think a lot of people don't probably think about them in this context, right? Because it's much more of a kind of a technology that facilitates that process. But you had some interesting conversations with them about it, right?
Yeah, and they really have been expanding what they do, and they see themselves along with, let's say, WorkHuman as employee experience and culture sort of assistance using technology for that. They have a OC Tanner Institute that talks about a lot of the topics that sort of are downstream from the tech that we talk about. Sort of what is the application? What is the sort of human side, and how can your systems help with that? So I had a chance to sit at dinner with Dr. Alexander Lovell, who wrote this report. It's called Shift. It's the 2024 Global Culture Report from OC Tanner. And it's a large book. It talks more on sort of the human side of what we see. We talk about some of that in our research. But one little point that struck out to me is they surveyed, do you think your organization cares about you? Right? A little touchy-feely, sometimes more than what we might ask, but I like it. It's an interesting question. Do you think your organization cares about you? And they looked at communication, for instance, and they said, okay, well, if communication happened early in their organization, it was much more likely that you would say the organization cared about you, 7.5 times, in fact, if it was frequent and if it was clear and it was honest. And I think that those are interesting numbers because when we talk about what AI can do, we just sort of leave the rest all off to the side. So here's what you can do. And then you focus on being human. Okay, well, what does that mean? Like, how do I help with that? So you can help make these decisions. Maybe AI can help you craft some messages or help you look through it for natural language processing, see some bias, see some language in these communications, help with that. But then you need to make a decision as what would you want and what do you know that humans are looking for? Open, honest, quick, get communication out as soon as something happens, rather than sitting there waiting and going through what's just the right language. It's more important to get it out there. And I think it's just so important to think about what we do well as humans when we are talking about AI, because as we've discussed, it's not really about job replacement. It can be job enhancement, but it will be job replacement if you don't figure out how to use AI to your advantage and also to figure out what you as a person does best and to make use of the information that organizations like ours have for you.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think you're right on in the fact that, and I don't think, although it can be a little overwhelming to try and think about the amount of updates we all have to make when it comes to skills. And I keep thinking every day, like my phone, just the simple thing of adding a new app to my phone these days makes me a little bit more frustrated than positive. Used to be really excited about, I got a new app that's going to be better. No. And like, I've got so many apps, none of them are sort of doing what I need them to do. Sometimes it feels that way a little bit, I think, with all these conversations. But what we're seeing in the data, that actually sort of leads to the 2023 Talent Health Index that Cornerstone put out that we're going to talk about. But we're seeing in their data that 41% of employees don't believe they have what they need to develop their skills. And 65% of employees are looking for additional learning content. Like, people want to learn. I think that's the thing that's oftentimes people are excited about learning how they learn and the approach that we take and the time we give them. Those are always the things I think oftentimes get lost in that conversation, because there's so many times that we say we want people to develop skills. We want people to be better at AI. We want people to be better. But oftentimes we don't give them the resources to do that or the time to do it effectively, right?
That's exactly it. When we're talking about the learning aspect to it, we are often just thinking of numbers like, this is what most people want to learn this way, or this is what we see the majority of the other organizations are going for, right? This is a style. But we forget this idea of personalization, customization. Really, you hear those terms a lot, but that's what it really is finding the style, finding the content, finding the time, finding the length, anything of how we learn is very important. But also remembering, that human side of it is people do want to. It's not sort of tricking them into getting this information. It's just like with the communication, people want it. But the timeliness of it and the openness of it, the honesty of the communication, it's the same for learning. And taking these lessons that we've learned and using the technology that we've got in the best possible way. That's kind of our mandate, isn't it, here? So.
It's important. And I think the thing we're seeing, even whether it's through organizations like Cornerstone, who are kind of surveying people who already are sort of interested in talent and learning and those kind of things, or when you're talking to just the general public in general, what we do know is that most organizations aren't giving enough time, right? Like, they're just not giving enough time or energy sometimes to the learning that needs to happen. And so if there's anything that organizations can maybe think about is they want to sort of, when they're stating, I did a stat in a presentation that I delivered for Checkers Cab Group the previous week. They asked me to come in and talk a little bit about talent technology and what was happening. And we were sort of recashing what was happening in the market. And what we found is that 45% of manufacturing organizations in a survey done by the Manufacturing Association organization basically said they could not fulfill their near-term business goals and needs because they lack the talent to do the work they needed to do, right? When those are real business issues, you really need to start thinking about things like learning and development and growing that talent from within in many cases, right?
Yeah, that reaction wasn't fake, by the way. I had not got a chance to speak to Stacey since that event. So that's fascinating. I'm always amazed by, that sort of practitioner side and seeing the issues that are being faced directly. So pretty fascinating stuff there. So we'll have to talk a little bit about some of the events you've been at, but let's see, there's a little bit more news and a little bit more on that sort of information side. There was an announcement, it was actually on LinkedIn that we saw this, although I'm sure there's other venues you could look into this. But Jack Altman, the CEO of Lattice, announced their newest product, Lattice HRIS. And this is sort of I wouldn't call it a rebranding, but perhaps a packaging, because they have had performance, engagement, as they say, compensation, career development, goals and achievements. So sort of tying it into the HRIS allows them, I think, most importantly, I think you'd agree, is getting a centralized and true system of record for employees. I think when you're working within these systems, as we talked about before, was organizations are literally putting out products to sort of help you visualize all the things that are going in there. It really shows that with all these add-ins and all these plugins, it's so important to keep our data in one place that we know is a system of truth, capital T. And clearly they're responding to that market need, I think, because it has other functions, of course, your workflows, your processing, onboarding, offboarding, employee records, very important as we talk about compliance. But I think being a system of record is the key feature here.
Yeah. And this one is sort of interesting. So for those who might not know Lattice, they kind of grew up in the performance management space, and then they added engagement and career development. They actually were one of our top 5 performance management solutions in our Voice of the Customer, User Experience, and Vendor Satisfaction ratings last year. I think they won one of our badges that we do each year in this area for their ratings. Lattice has been well known as what we consider one of the best of grade point solutions in this space for a very long time. And what's sort of interesting in this is that we haven't seen many talent suites grow into HR full platforms, right? Oftentimes you see talent and talent solutions and talent suites get picked up by enterprise platforms, right? Back in the day, we saw SuccessFactors get picked up by SAP, Taleo get picked up by Oracle, right? And then they become part of the bigger HRIS platform conversation through that, right? And the only other organization that I know of that's really sort of done this kind of expansion would be Cornerstone. Cornerstone has rolled out sort of what we consider HRIS Lite, and they use it a lot in sort of large European organizations who have multinational needs, who have a really strong sort of lots of different payrolls. And so they really just need an employer of record. And you kind of are seeing that here with Lattice. You're also seeing it with organizations like HiBob. They have a bit of an employer record with the payroll partners and then sort of a talent focus, right? But it's what's really interesting, and we don't know because we haven't had this briefing with Lattice since they made this announcement. So we haven't had a chance to talk to them about what this looks like. The big thing about employer record and an HRIS is really the issue of effective dating. Now, effective dating might be a more technical issue and conversation for a lot of people, but it is the idea that a system has the capacity to hold parallel timelines inside of it, because it really comes down to when things change inside of your employer, like I get hired on the 10th, but I may not get all my paperwork in for 2 days. You have to be able to hold that in the system that you were onboarding on the 10th, and that there was 2 days before the paperwork was hired, but the paperwork backdates to completion so that you can have all your benefits or all of your government requirements done for the date that you were hired, right? And you have to hold both of those dates in the system and the active date that was happened to be able to be a true sort of effective data HRIS system. And a lot of talent suites haven't had to do that because they're able to have just one timeline. I do a performance date on this date and effective things happen on that date, right? I mean, Cliff, you've worked in HR before. Effective dating is pretty important because people just don't get things done when oftentimes the paperwork needs to get done, right?
Yeah, especially coming, and I hate to give away just how ancient I am, but the days of it's a requirement to keep all the records in a fireproof safe, right? Which shows they weren't even thinking on the digital side, and that was an actual law. But there are so many little cases that pop up when you're a user that you don't think of that can have amazingly huge ramifications. One that comes up if you work at a publicly traded company or really any company of stock is stock vestments, because a lot of people will wait for that exact day to be vested in and take their options. And if that day is off, that can be millions of dollars in lawsuits and in liability. And that's just one case. But those 1 days, 2 days, as Stacey mentioned, not uncommon and can have amazing ramifications. And again, that's just one little case of why these things are so important. But not just keeping the record straight. Obviously, payroll matters a lot, but there's a lot of other ones that you may not think of, but that you need to think of. So, yeah,
HRSs play a big role, more, I think, oftentimes than a lot of people think of. So we'll look forward to maybe getting a briefing from Lattice on this and learning more about what they consider part of their HRIS model here. It'll be interesting to see how this goes. I think the other thing for them to keep in mind, if you're a Lattice customer, is this also might make some of the other enterprise platforms that they partner really well with right now a little more leery about partnering with them, because now they become more direct competition, or could become more direct competition in some cases. And it's a challenge across the market for anybody, right? There's always that co-opetition, frenemy, however you want to call it, issue. On one hand, you're oftentimes working on integrations. On the other hand, you're oftentimes building similar tool sets. But I think in this particular case, a lot of organizations had partnered with Lattice as the best of breed solution that they could bring in safely into their environment and not have to worry about customers possibly migrating to them for an HRIS or anything that would sort of replace their core products. This might have an impact on that as well. So,
yeah, absolutely. And speaking of, as we were talking about that sort of market consolidation and things moving around, this is from a couple weeks ago, but then again, it's going to be a couple weeks to hear it. I think it's important to mention something that we had on our list, but also you were just talking ADP, so I thought it might be good to bring this up. I just want to mention their acquisition of Sora. So that was some workflow automation and data integration tools. We mentioned another one in our last episode, and we were just sort of talking about how important this is. And I think we've made that case already in this episode as well, of why it matters so much to have these workflows and to have this data integration, not just in the sort of out of the box integration you might get, but to have a third party handling this for compliance reasons, for decision-making reasons, make sure you have the right data. And when you think about ADP, I mean, this is not a company we need to introduce. You can imagine how important this sort of data integration is if they went ahead and acquired a company specifically for this reason.
Yeah, this is a big one, and we'll just roll right into the. Yeah. So I attended the ADP Innovation Summit for, almost a week and a half ago now. It seems that it was just yesterday for ADP, which was basically just industry analysts who go to that event. That this is not their users conference, which I think you went to a little earlier this year. I got some updates from them. And what generally they do here is Maria Black, who's the CEO, and the entire sort of product team, including their new product lead and strategy people, who they've got several new people on those teams that basically had a chance to brief us on all the things that are important to them and coming up and that they think we should be aware of. And they also have a list of customers who attend there who are really willing to share some pretty open conversations. We do like their customer panels are really great because they allow them to basically answer any question at all. And I did a big write-up on this on LinkedIn. So if you're looking for a little more sort of granular detail on it, I would definitely go to LinkedIn. But this Sora, I think is how we pronounce it, acquisition was a big part of one of the launches that ADP made, which is this one integration, which is the idea that you can now do more seamless workflows and integrations across all the various ADP applications, because they do have a lot of disparate sort of pieces and parts, and they're trying to sort of build a more unified platform model across all the different user types that they have. And this is one of the tools that will help to do that across also their very large marketplace and their partner. They're probably one of the largest partner models on the market as well. And I was pleased to see this because I do think ADP has for a long time really just assumed their users will sort of figure it out, right? Like it's definitely been a bit of a challenge. I think their marketplace has been nice. They have open APIs on a lot of cases, right? But I do think in this particular case, they're starting to realize that this integration is a big important. Being able to see in the same, because the integration basically, just for lack of understanding, is that it's not just that I can see these screens in the same place and can click over and see one screen versus another screen, but it actually makes sure the data arrives more quickly from one place to another. And that's always been a bit of a challenge with any of these larger payroll solution providers who have multiple sort of variations of HRMSs along with variations of payroll engines. And ADP being the largest really in the world at this, I think in particular, this is a good move for them because you want to be able to see your time management data and it needs to basically show up the same type of data as what you're seeing in your payroll system. And the one way to do it is to make sure you have a better integration. And that's really what this does. So I would say this is a big part of where ADP is heading. A lot of the other things that we heard while we were there were, though, I think, Cliff, for you and I both being in this space, ADP has been the predominant global payroll vendor in the market. But we know that there's a lot of organizations sort of pushing those boundaries, trying to get into that space. And I think ADP was really solidifying that they want to continue to own this space with their 140 countries, that they have the scale and the benefits and the capabilities to do this effectively, that they can do it for small, medium, and large organizations. And Srini Kutam, who's the new president, global product and innovation head, comes from a chief HR officer background, which he actually ran HR for ADP for a while, which I thought was really amazing because he really comes at it from a practitioner perspective in payroll and values the strategic role that payroll has in the market. Maria Black, who is now in her second year, right? Maybe it's a year now, full year in as the new CEO and president of ADP, was really focused on the services conversation and the numbers and the sort of value proposition that they're providing to their customers. And so you were hearing a really strong message this time from ADP about how they were going to basically execute effectively on some very practical wins for the market and for their buyers, and make sure that they were continuing to grow, particularly in their global market outreach efforts. And so those are probably the two big themes that came out of that event. But it was a big event, and there's a lot more details on LinkedIn on that.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. As long as we're on the topic, since I already sort of mentioned my event, you were really the road warrior these last couple of weeks. Speaking of giant global organizations, were you in attendance for Oracle Cloud World, or were you watching online? Were there any other events you went to? I've honestly had to try and remember which time zone you're in, so I don't bug you too early.
We're hitting our half hour mark already, and I'm just thinking, boy, there's even more to tell. So yeah, I'll hit the highlights, but again, I'll push the audience to go back to probably the LinkedIn summary I made. I was at Oracle Cloud World's first 2 days. They did have a third day that they're running today, but I came back because there's important things to get done, like a big annual paper. And I'd been on the road for about 2 weeks. And so, but I think, and I made sure I attended the days I think that was going to have the most insight on what they're doing with the HR space. But there's no doubt that both at ADP and Oracle event, AI and the conversation about artificial intelligence was front and center. I think the difference between the two, which is sort of an interesting dynamic, I think, to sort of compare what we saw, is ADP was really focusing on sort of artificial intelligence as it relates to helping the HR professional and the manager get their job done easier. There was much more of a focus on HR and HR work efforts, right? The workflows and nudges and automation from an HR perspective. Oracle's perspective on artificial intelligence, which I think was just as good and just as practical, which is what I love. If I'm looking at artificial intelligence, I want you to take work off my plate. I don't want you to add more work to my plate, right? Which oftentimes happen with some of these things. Their focus was a little bit more on the manager and the employee perspective and helping nudge them and helping get their work a little more streamlined and a little more ease. Both of them did a little bit of both, but I think that if I were to differentiate between the two, and Oracle definitely was focused more on AI than I've seen at any other event that I've been to up to this date, right? That was the minute you walked in the door, Steve Miranda, who oversees their Oracle applications as a whole, would basically hit you with AI is the future of where we're heading. And they wrapped up the big day of conversations with Larry Ellison, who's now their chief technical officer, with basically their founder, because they now have Safar Katz, who's the new president and CEO. Larry basically ended the day with basically saying, look, it's all about AI, going so far as to show sort of like a RoboCop kind of future where we're providing automated cars with all the tools you need from an AI perspective to make both safer environments for both our service professionals, those who are firefighters and policemen and emergency service people, as well as for the people that they're serving. So you have all the data and information in front of you, and you have all the details, and you've got visualization, what's happening all around you. So you're not feeling like you're in the dark, which means you're making maybe more informed decisions before you take action that might hurt anybody, either yourself and or some of the people that you're supposed to be helping. So it was a really interesting, I think, dynamic to go to both of these events very quickly. The other thing that at the Oracle event that I thought was interesting is that they launched some really fundamental things this week. We saw them launch a new optimized workforce scheduling tool that go along with their recent updates in their workforce management solution on time and attendance. And this was focused on optimizing scheduling, particularly for the healthcare industry, but really it could have gone across all industries, which is important because that's an industry that I think has been struggling with all the shift differentials and the challenges around what nurses and doctors and clinicians need to be able to service all the needs within a hospital and a office environment where they might be going back and forth to different locations. So they rolled that out, and that was pretty aggressive. And it was also tied to skills, which to me is huge because we're only seeing maybe one or two other organizations really do that. Workday's been working heavily on putting their skills connection to their workforce management. We're not seeing that in some of the big players, right? And so this was a direct shot across the bow, to be honest, to our friends over at UKG and their Dimensions product, which they're rolling and repositioning as the UKG Pro time and attendance and scheduling product, and particularly after their healthcare clients who are now starting to think about rolling products into the cloud. So it'll be like we said last year in the annual HR system survey that workforce management was heating up. Time management systems are going to be flipping. Payroll systems were going to be flipping. We saw lots of payroll flip this year. Our numbers this year are going to show you that workforce management, time management hasn't completely flipped. I think this is going to be the year we're going to see it. All the vendors have come out with competitive solutions, not comparable, but competitive solutions with different ways of thinking about time management. And so if you're in the need of change, this would be the year you're probably going to be looking at your options. And there are more options than we've seen in a long time in this space. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. The other thing that they launched, I think that's really important to note outside of sort of all the AI embedded work that they had done, was a new rewards and recognition functionality. Cliff, you and I, they call it Celebrate. It goes along with their Oracle Me products. But this is something I'm trying to think, is rewards and recognition offered by any of the other big providers by themselves? I'd have to go back to all my detailed notes and look, but I thought maybe you might know if anybody else had completely built that from scratch and built it.
I will say that there is functionality.
Yeah.
Meaning like a Ceridian will have something where you're able to sort of give kudos or something like that, but it wouldn't be tied into their own sort of system of physical rewards, which is sort of the opposite direction is what OC Tanner took, right? They were known for their physical items and gift cards, anything like that, and then built out the sort of talent and the more recognition side of that, and then bringing that into culture. But yeah, I would say almost always when you're trying to bring it out, you sort of had to farm it out or buy completely. So yeah, very rare. And you're right, they may be the only one that truly has a from the ground up.
Yeah, we'll see. And they put a point system to it. So the goal in their perspective is that this could replace monetary and physical item solutions, right? It'll be interesting to see how that goes. And now that we're seeing these organizations sort of go off into the areas that for a long time were only owned by point solutions, like workforce management, like rewards and recognition, like benefits. I think we are starting to see sort of an enterprise conversation start that, again, it is really hard to get all in one system. I don't think that we're going to get there. Our data is showing that we're continuing to see increases in the number of overall systems that people are using. But a lot of that has to do with the complexity of regional and business unit specific requirements. But I do think that the core enterprise HR applications that are connected to either finance systems or an enterprise level view of HR are really pushing for the fact that you do need as much as possible in a central location to be able to do the kind of artificial intelligence suggestions and analysis and views that they're all recommending, because none of that works if your data is all in different systems, right? The great workforce planning optimization that we saw at Oracle was amazing, but it would only work if you were tied into your healthcare system, whether that be Epic or Cerner. Now, Cerner automatically, because Oracle owns them, is obviously got a direct connection, and it's feeding in all the data about open beds and open shifts and patients and patient loads that is feeding that scheduling conversation. But they did say that very soon, I think was the word that I heard, that could be easily done with Epic as well through their open connectors. So it's not like it happens out of the box. And so much of this depends on the fact that tools can now do it, but we've got to get the data connected. And if anything came out of the Oracle conversation for me, it was they're really trying to lay the groundwork that they have the servers, the tools, the expansion platforms, the platforms as a service, all of those things that can be basically your platform for doing artificial intelligence, no matter what technology you're using. So it'll be interesting to see where it heads to. There's a lot more that I've noted in the LinkedIn article, so I definitely would push everyone to go look at that as well.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes as well. And it reminds me too, we always love to hear from you, but I'd really like to make a specific request. Anyone that's working in the healthcare industry, that's one that we see quite a bit of in our research. And I've been noting a lot of the comments that have been coming in from our annual survey. You're a talkative bunch. We'd love to hear from you. How are you seeing these systems? As they said, that whole integration has not been rolled out yet, but what are you most looking forward to? Reach out to us. We'd love to hear and talk about some of those stories.
Yeah, it'd be very interested to hear if some of these new things that all the vendors are putting forward, particularly in the workforce and time management space, are they doing all the things you need them to do, right? Because that is the most complex area when it comes to getting it right for your employees, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think what we need to do probably is to wrap it up. We've got a lot to do. I'm sure our listeners do too, but thank you so much. I want to point out for our listeners that a lot of that was information that you couldn't get anywhere else because Stacey was out there putting in the delightful time on airplanes that we all enjoy so that she could be at these events and get the hottest tea from around the nation and the world. So thank you, Stacey, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cliff. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it was definitely, this is travel season, but for all analysts, it's funny. Someone asked me what's your role at these events? Are you a participant or are you a partner? I said, I'm neither. Yes. We're an independent, neutral sort of industry analyst, and we're not quite media either, because we're not just reporting what they put in a press release either, right? We are trying to make sure that we're reporting what we see and what we hear and how we think it fits into the things and the questions that we've been asked. So it's a unique role we play as industry analysts. And there's usually about 20 or so of us at each of these events. And it is a big part, I think, of us understanding what questions to ask and making sure we're talking to the participants while we're there at these events. But we'd love to hear from you. And I do agree that the healthcare space is a space that is rapidly changing right now. And it's an opportunity, I think, for us to basically share your comments with these vendors so that they get it right, because everybody wants to do a good job. We're all trying trying to do the right thing here. The question is, how do we get it right for you? So with that being stated, because that we are over by, I think, at least 10 minutes now at this point on our normal 30 minutes. So I thank you everyone for hanging in there with us. As we wrap today, just a last big push to join us in Las Vegas on October 10th October 9th through the 13th. And to make sure you stay through the end of the week for the keynote on Friday morning. It's the only place that you're going to see that data. Just as an FYI, you won't be able to get that deck anywhere else, and you won't be able to get that data anywhere else except for at that session at that conference. So just be aware of that. It's important to attend if you want to get the unique data that we're going to be sharing at that conference. Also, right after that, we're going to be launching the full white paper, which will have even more data than we've had in the past. So be sure to sign up for that, and so that you're aware when that launches, and go to our website to purchase and download it. It's going to be, as we said, over 200 pages this year with more data than we've ever had in the market. Also, go to our website and sign up for our newsletter to get ongoing updates on all the research launches that we're going to have throughout the year, because we can't get it all out in one paper, although we've tried as much as possible. And be sure to listen to our sister HR Huddle podcast, HR We Have a Problem, hosted by our CEO, Terry Zipper. These HR Huddle episodes are important to us. We've had some really good ones. We know there was a really great one that we just did with Holger Mueller on AI, that we got a lot of people who seem to be interested in that topic. We did a great one on payroll just recently that I would recommend. So some great tools for you guys to download. And if you'd like help to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review where you grab your podcast. To stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news and get all the behind the scenes content, you can follow us at Sapient Insights on LinkedIn, or follow me at Stacey Harris on LinkedIn, or Cliff Stevenson on LinkedIn, because that's where you're going to hear some of these in the immediate moment updates to some of these events that we'll be attending between now and the mid-November. And then finally, Cliff, thanks as always for putting together all the content and information so we can make sure we stay on track for the podcast each week. Thanks to our Brand Method Media Group, who helps us produce our podcast, run by amazing founder Kelly. Thanks to our marketing team, Lisa Renko and Summer. And thanks to our listeners and community. We couldn't do this without you. It is absolutely important to us that we are bringing you all the news that you can use every week. And that's it for this episode of Spilling the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you needed to start the engines running this week. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another pot of boiling hot HR Tech updates and insights. Bye, everyone.